Hey everyone, it's Miss Stewart here. I'm going to be doing our yeast lab where we'll be looking at how yeast does cellular respiration. So you all should have the directions so that you can follow along with me, and I'll walk you through the steps. You can see it all being set up and then we can collect our data together. So the first thing that we're going to actually start with is yeast, and this is just regular yeast that you can get at a grocery store. Yeast is actually a living organism, so in here there's going to be millions of little yeast organisms that can each do cellular respiration, so that's why we are using them to test for this experiment. So I already did the first step where I took half a teaspoon of yeast and I put it into each of these balloons so that we can use these balloons for putting them into our test tube setup. So then what I'm going to do is going to get our setup here, and I have some water that has been warming, and I need to get 10 milliliters of warm water into each of these. So I'm going to use my graduated cylinder here, fill it up to 10. I'm going to put 10 in each tube here. All right, so we have the water in each, and the next step is going to be putting sugar in. So I've got my sugar right here, again, just like regular sugar that you would get at the grocery store. I'm going to use a funnel to put sugar into each of them. Now, as the directions say, I'm going to leave one so that it says none. We're not going to have any sugar in there. And I'm putting half a teaspoon of each. And then I need to just mix each of them up. So I'll shake it, make sure that I get all that sugar in there. Try to start getting it dissolved a little bit. Again, there's going to be none in there. So what I have done is I've labeled each of them. So this one says none, and then these are our 3 trials. So they say 1, 2, 3. So then I'm going to put the balloon on each. I'm going to make sure that there's no air in the balloon, so I'm going to squeeze all the air out. That one. And then I even used a different color balloon for the one that has no sugar, just so that it is super obvious. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the yeast into each of these, and I'm going to mix it all up. So we'll just go one by one. This process is actually a little bit hard. I've got to try to get all of the yeast out of here. And then I'm going to start mixing it because you want the yeast to be all dissolved. It says to do it for at least a minute, but I've kind of got a system down, so I will maybe not have to do it for that long. But you just want to make sure that it's all dissolved in there. And once it's dissolved, then we will start our timer. We're Gonna do our next one here for each of these trials. And as the directions say, once I get them mixed, I need to put them in a warm water bath. And that is because of the fact that yeast is actually going to be, if you've ever baked, you know that yeast needs to be warm. And so if it gets too cold, it can't actually do cellular respiration. So we have to keep it warm, and that's why we're putting it in a warm water bath, because the water that I first put in was actually warmed, and if I were to just leave that water sitting out, it would get cold, and you need it to be warm for the yeast. Okay, so now that I've got all of those, I've put it in a warm water bath, and I am going to start my timer. There we go. I'm actually starting it. So this timer is going to, see if I can prop it up so you guys can see it. Prop it up there, and then I'll just make it lower. So we're gonna set it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 and 20 is when we're gonna take our data. And every minute or so, I'm also going to go and swirl each of these because otherwise it gets kind of clogged up. So I'm just gonna take them out and give them a swirl. So one of the things that you need to do is also record qualitative data, which just means like the things that you're seeing. So here's gonna be 3 of our test tubes. The one on the left has none, and 1 and 2 are gonna be ones that do have sugar. So I want you to kind of notice like what you're seeing in here. If you can't tell, this one on the right, all that movement is bubbles. So with 1 and 2 and with 3, I just don't have it. All of those have bubbles forming, and the one that says none does not have any bubbles forming right now. So I'm just gonna try to not knock over my camera here. I'm going to keep every minute or so just shaking these. And we'll wait until 5 minutes to collect our data. If you look at number 1 here, the bubbles are all the way like up to the top. So number 1 has a lot of bubbles. Also, Mr. Bohr is the one who donated the balloons, hence the cougars. Normally, I would not accept that, but I guess they're being thrown away, so it doesn't matter anyways. Once again, one's going crazy with the bubbles. It's all full of bubbles. And the reason that I keep shaking these is just to keep the yeast moved around. In these test tubes, it can get kind of crammed up, and I want to make sure that it doesn't get all clumped up so that we aren't blocking anything with our air circulation. Okay, so we've reached 5 minutes, which means we're going to do our first round of data collection. And the way that we're going to do this is we are going to calculate the circumference of our balloons. And I'm going to use a piece of string and a ruler because I can't move the ruler around. So we're going to start with the none. So there is no sugar in this one. I'm going to measure, I want to measure at the same place in the balloon, so right in the middle. If you hear banging in the background, that is construction being done at the science building. Sorry, I can't help it. Okay, so for our no sugar balloon, the circumference is 13 centimeters. And that is the one that says none. So then we will go with number 1. As you can tell, it actually has a little bit of air in it. So I'm going to get the circumference of that one. So for number 1, our 5-minute data point is going to be 15 centimeters. Then we'll do number 2 here. Number 2 is at 13.5. And number 3 is also at 13.5. So now the timer's still going during this whole time. I'm gonna go back to mixing them up a little bit. Remember, for our qualitative data, let's see, in the none, we don't have any bubbles. The liquid is like kind of milky colored because we have dissolved yeast in there. We still have bubbles being formed for number 3. Number 1 is basically like full to the top of bubbles. There's some more bubbles still being made at the bottom there. And number 2 also has a bunch of bubbles in there. All right, so we've hit 10 minutes. So we're gonna do our next round of data collection. We're gonna go back to our group with nothing in it. And it's at 13 centimeters again. Gonna go to number 1, which, as you can see, is starting to fill up with some air. So it's at 14.5 for number 1. Number 2 is at 14.7. And number 3 is at 15.1. right, so we're at 15 minutes, so we're gonna collect our data again. This balloon is still pretty flat. So it's at 13.2. And keep in mind, some of this might be a little bit of error because I can only be so precise with this. All right, balloon 1 goes to 16.2. Balloon 2 is at 15.6. And balloon 3 is at 15.3. You can see, still filled with bubbles. Still bubbles going at the bottom. Keep in mind the qualitative data. I'll try to hold these up so you can see them. Those ones, they're starting to get kind of full here. This one is still not blown up. All right, so we're at 20 minutes. We're gonna do our final data collection. All right, so we're at 20 minutes. We're gonna do our final data collection. Our group with no sugar is at 13.1. Balloon, or sorry, test tube number 1. Is at 17.1. This is, number 2 is right here. Blue number 2 is at 16.7. And balloon number 3 is at 16.3. And again, as we're looking at these, all 3 of these, oh, you can't see that. All 3 of these are blown up, and this one is not blown up. So now we have the last part of our experiment. And this is something called BTB. And BTB turns yellow when it's in the presence of carbon dioxide. So I'm going to see what type of gas is inside these. So that one has carbon dioxide inside of it because it turned yellow. That was number 1. This is number 2. Number 2 also has carbon dioxide inside of it. Whoops. Number 3, the gas is carbon dioxide. And this one, we don't really have any gas in it, but I'll squeeze what I have. It is not carbon dioxide. So that shows us that the gas that was inside is carbon dioxide. And that is your yeast lab. So now we'll take that data and we'll be able to do something with it.